A linear pattern is the first one we're going to start with. Now this is the most simplest pattern that we have. This is the first one we teach in the Essentials class when we go through it. I'm going to go into this in depth just so I can show you all of the check boxes that maybe you haven't paid attention to before. But then we're going to sort of speed up through some of the simpler patterns after that. So let me go ahead and go to SOLIDWORKS here. And let me open an example for my linear pattern. And here it is. And you can see we have a nice little cow here of our linear pattern, or excuse me, of our seed. If you're curious about how I got that in there, it was just a sketch picture that I traced around. But I figured it's a little bit more fun than just doing holes. You don't want to be boring with paper clips and bottle caps, so we went with the cow. Now you're going to notice that this cut is a through-wall cut, and it's got a wedge shape here. Now, you might not always be cutting into a wedge. A lot of times you're cutting into something that has a uniform thickness, like a plate or something like that. The reason I did this as a wedge is so I can show you some of these check boxes you might come across. I'm going to go and choose my linear pattern right here on my feature toolbar. I need to give it a direction. So I'm going to choose an edge to follow. You'll notice I get a nice little arrow here for my direction. If you want to flip the direction to go in the other way, you can click the arrow or you can click this box over here. Now in this case, we want multiple cows, so let's do 5 of them. And let's space them, I don't know, let's guess, 30 millimeters apart. That looks good. Now you can go in a second direction as well. We'll come back to that. Let's go down here to what we want to pattern. We want to pattern a feature right here. So I'm going to click cow. Whoops. Highlight my box, click cow. Tell it what I wanted. And then it spaces it evenly. It looks like I need to close out my Google here. There we go. Maybe speed up my audio quality. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. I'm getting a little message that says I might be experiencing some degrading audio. Yep, okay, now it went away. All right, so hopefully you guys can still hear me. So I chose features to pattern, and you can see it patterned my cow evenly a distance of 30 millimeters. We can add another one in here. Let's do 6 of them. All right. Now, one thing that I always do when I do patterns is I turn on down here full preview. Now, if you are experiencing really slow models, really large, elaborate models, then yeah, you can go to partial preview. But one reason I choose full preview is so that I know I'm getting a good preview of my results. And one reason I do that is because of this checkbox down here under Options. There's something here called geometric pattern or geometry pattern. What this does is it takes your seed and looks at its in condition, and it snaps the depth of just that particular seed and mimics that depth in every single instance. If I uncheck geometry pattern, what it does, and you're going to see it's going to take a little bit longer here to show the preview, is it takes and it figures out the in condition for every single instance in your pattern, which is going to make for a larger file size, and it's going to make for a larger rebuild time. So I highly recommend you check this box if you have uniform thickness in your part and that you don't care about it solving for each in condition, for each instance in your pattern. So that little box is going to save you some time. Now, remember I said full preview? If you have partial preview turned on, it doesn't care whether you have this checked or not. It gives you the same preview. So that's why I recommend keeping full preview turned on unless there's a reason you want it turned off so you can see what this geometry pattern is really doing for you. Down here's that propagate visual properties. That's the one that I said would take colors and cosmetic threads, and it would put that on every single instance. So this is actually going to slow your model down. So I recommend unchecking that unless you have a reason of putting that in there. Now some of this other stuff we will get to in a minute. I'm going to go back up and add in a second direction here. And I'm going to make sure my arrow is going in the other direction by clicking it. And I'm going to tell it I want, I don't know, 3 of these. And let's space them something like, I don't know, 30. Like that. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now, you'll notice it patterns not just my seed in this direction, but it patterns everything from my first direction as well. If you don't like that, there is a checkbox here. You can check, and what it will do is it will pattern only the seed in both of those directions. In this case, we did want all of them, so I'm going to uncheck the box again. Now you'll notice I can still do faces as well if I wanted to. So let's say that I wanted to pattern a face. I would click this box and then go get that face. I'm not going to show it to you now. We'll do it in a simpler model. These cows are pretty elaborate, so I don't want to do it right now. That would be a lot of faces to have to click. But you'll notice that if I click bodies to pattern, it shrinks down my features to pattern. It will not let you do a body and a feature. It's an either or kind of thing. So you have to do one at a time. So in this case, we want to stick with that feature. Down here, there is something interesting called instances to skip. If you click it, you'll get a blue box with a bunch of pink spheres on the screen. All these are toggle buttons, and it will let you toggle on and off which cow you might want to skip. So here I didn't want that cow. Maybe I didn't want this one. And it will skip over just the ones you click on. And it will put it in this list down here. If you change your mind, just click the sphere again, and it will come back. There you go. Now we're going to talk about feature scope. Now I happen to have multiple bodies in this part because my cow had lots of spots, and when I cut through it, it left behind little islands in the middle, so I actually have multiple bodies. This feature scope will only appear if you have a multi-body part. And basically what it's saying is, what do you want to pattern? Do you want to pattern all the bodies in this feature? How do you want to intersect with this? Lots of times you might want to ignore a body in the cut. So you could do that by just saying select and then removing the auto select and going through and selecting the bodies where you wanted it to apply the particular cut to. In this case, we'll just leave it with the selected bodies and let it automatically select everything for us. Down here at the bottom, there's something called instances to vary. This is new in 2013. We'll get to that in a little bit. So I'll just go ahead and say OK to this. And there you go. Now what I wanted to do now is show you. See, I have this set where these right here went through all, but these were set where they were the same depth as our first one. And if I come up and go to Tools, Feature Statistics, you're going to see that our pattern took 1.64 seconds to rebuild. Now if we go and edit that pattern, I'm going to take a second here and tell it that we want not to use this geometry pattern. So I'm going to uncheck it so that all of our end conditions for every single one is figuring out its own end condition. So each instance goes through all. And we go back to our tools and go down to feature statistics. You'll see it's now at 4.52 seconds. So yeah, it's not a long time in the grand scheme of things, but you'll notice as you're adding more instances and more parts that have patterns into assemblies, you're going to see that time's going to start jumping up. So that's why I recommend checking that geometry pattern box if you have uniform wall thickness, or if you don't have some surface like this wedge that you're going through, because it is going to speed up the time, and it will also speed up your file sizes as well.